Look, it's often said that strategic planning is dead. In this complex, uncertain world we live in, it changes so quickly that it's no longer relevant. I mean, why plan if at 24 hours notice a new product like, say, a smartphone can leap into the world and change the way we think about business and strategy forever? And for that reason, a lot of people have given up strategic planning. They've given up formal organisational planning. And they've given it up for the right reasons, because it actually doesn't work. But we're still left with the same kinds of problems. How do we find certainty in an uncertain world? So in my view, the need to plan is as great as ever, but the kind of planning we do actually has to change. We need to be able to plan for the long term, to look a long way ahead, and at the same time be able to respond rapidly to the world around us. And that's the challenge of 21st century planning. The paradox of the 21st century is this: we want certainty in uncertain times. And to understand that, I think we actually need to understand what makes this part of history different to the times that went before it. Design academic Kayes Dorst theorises that there are 4 aspects to the 21st century issue or problem that make them unique or different. The first is that 21st century problems are open. It's very hard to define boundaries. It's very hard to draw lines around them. Secondly, 21st century problems are complex. There's lots of different overlays of problems within them. One problem has many different aspects. There are social and political overlays as well, which can make them very, very difficult. 21st century problems are also dynamic. They change, or the world changes while we're trying to solve the problem. You often get the overlay then of short-term issues like technology changes and long-term shifts such as demographic shifts or political shifts. And finally, and I think this is the most intuitive, 21st century problems are networked, and we've all experienced this. So you address one problem or an issue and you get a knock-on effect to the other. So if Dorst is even remotely correct, we need to change the nature of the way we plan because of the world we face, which is full of open, complex, networked and dynamic issues and problems. Effective approaches to planning seem to have 3 features. The first is they acknowledge but they're not defined by the uncertain world we live in. You know the fact that you're unable to predict what's happening tomorrow, but you don't let that define what you're actually doing. Secondly, they spend as much time on strategy, long-term vision, culture and values as short-term problem solving. Because if you know where you're headed and what you stand for, you're more easily able to bounce between the strategic and the operational problem solving and back again. And thirdly, the approaches to planning that appear to be working out there, they spend a lot of time on implementation. So it's not just about getting the plan and direction right, but it's actually ensuring it happens. And they spend a lot of time and energy on that. We're often asked how you go about building planning capability, but you start typically with a different question, and that is, who's actually responsible for the planning process and the outcomes? Because in my view it goes like this: executive management has got to be responsible for vision, for values, for company culture, the actual content of the plan, and what we call the plan implementation framework. And a plan implementation framework is simply the structures, the processes, the data you need to implement the plan. But implementation itself is the role of line management. And this is where some executives often get it wrong. You can't centralise and run command and control structures anymore. So you've got to delegate responsibility for implementation to line management. There's some recent research by Donald Sull that was published in the Harvard Business Review, which I think is really helpful on some of these things. And they make several points that I'd like to go through today. The first is this, is that the plan itself is a guide, it's not an end. And in the complex, open, network, dynamic world that we live in, if the plan's not working, you've got to be prepared to change the plan and change it quickly. The second point that he makes is the difference between vertical alignment around the goals and objectives of the plan and horizontal coordination across the organisation. And this is another area where we often fall down. There's people up and down the line know what's going on, but those people across the organisation, your colleagues and functions and you may not report to, are those that you can't actually rely on. And the third thing is that communication doesn't equal understanding. So it's not about the number of emails you send out or the number of meetings you hold about the plan. It's actually about the understanding people have of the content and how it all holds together. All of this just emphasises that we need a clear, explicit strategy and an implementation framework that makes it happen. Just to go over it again, it's really important to be clear on who's accountable for all aspects of the plan. So to my mind, as I've said, executive management has got to take responsibility for long-term strategy and direction, for values, for culture, and for the plan implementation framework. But the implementation itself is a role of line management, and these folk have to be delegated the accountability for making it happen. That's incredibly important. But the two work together, of course. Yeah, the one piece of advice you'd give senior managers about strategic planning: embrace the paradoxes of 21st century leadership. It's an uncertain world and we need more certainty. And your challenge, and my challenge, I suppose, working together, is to put in place the systems and processes you need to give you that certainty in uncertain times.